What is it about college football that just, makes us love the sport so much? When you talk about other sports, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to watching some baseball. I'm not opposed to watching even professional football. I'm more of a fantasy football guy is the main reason I watch professional football. But, I watch a lot of pro sports, but there's just something about college football, man, that just most people are so emotionally invested in college football more than any other sport. And the reason that I feel like a lot of that is the not so much nostalgic feelings, but the feelings that college football gives you. And that is, 1 minute you can be on the highest of mountaintops, and the next minute you can be in the lowest of valleys. You can be winning a game in overtime. You can be losing in overtime. The pendulum in college football is just one little swing away, and your emotions are either here or there. And I think that's why most people, including myself, love the sport so much. And we saw that this weekend. A lot of contests that we saw. We saw some overtime games. We saw some close football games, physical football games, games that could essentially have gone either way. And one fan base is celebrating. One set of fan bases is celebrating today, and the other set is not heartbroken, but disappointed, whatever you want to call it. Welcome back, guys. Another episode After the Whistle here, coming in to you live. So let's talk. Let's get into this weekend. Let's start on Friday night, and this was a spot for Florida State. I remember saying last week on the prediction show, I said, hey, listen, we talk about these trap games. We talk about these difficult spots that pop up in college football. And we talk about Florida State, Virginia on Friday night. Virginia has been playing some really good ball. Tony Elliott has got that team, and by all intensive purposes, that team should be undefeated there in Charlottesville. They're playing really good football. And it's a weird spot for Florida State because the factors that you have to think about here is, one, it's on a Friday night. It's on the road, and it's not a hostile environment, but it's just the fact that Virginia already has the home field advantage, but then also you add into the effect that, or you add in the fact that they also have an advantage by way of it's a short week for Florida State. They're having to travel to Charlottesville. So shorter week of prep for the Noles. It's just all in all, it's very heavily favoring Virginia here with a lot of the variables surrounding this football game. So, yeah, I mean, game starts off. Chandler Morris, what can you say about the guy? I mean, I know he throws 3 interceptions in this football game, but just a gutsy performance by him. You see kids all the time throw multiple interceptions, 2-3 interceptions a game, and you see sometimes kids get a little gun shy. They get a little scared to turn the ball loose. Chandler Morris didn't strike me, at all that was going to be his MO. He still managed to, during the football game, even after picks, he managed to still sling the ball all over the yard. And, the biggest the biggest thing with Virginia was taking advantage early of a couple Florida State turnovers. That was kind of, to me, what set the tone. 14 points off of a couple Seminole turnovers early kind of set the tone for Virginia to go, hey, we can hang with these guys. And sometimes that's all it takes. When you have a team like Virginia that's upset-minded and you go on the road, you cannot spot them a couple touchdowns. You can't give them any hope. You can't give them belief. You need to start fast, kick them in the teeth, and then just carry on about your business. And to me, watching this football game, that's what I saw from Virginia. I saw belief on that sideline. After the second touchdown, 14 points, they're sitting there, they're jumping up and down on the sideline, and that tells me all I need to know. Hey, the team's fired up. They believe they can do this. Can they do this? And that is essentially, what started this thing, and the snowball but then, I mean, Florida State, to their credit, 21 points in the second quarter. right back in it. It's 21-21 at halftime. You right the ship. You get back to a level playing field. Then it comes second half. Who wants it more? That is ultimately what it came down to in that second half was who wants it more? Virginia, Florida State. And it was a very back and forth game. Very back and forth game there in the second half. Heck of an effort by guys like Jamari Taylor on Virginia. Jamal Edrin and Chandler Morris, I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Just a gutsy effort on their part. This is definitely it's a team that's going to be a problem for some schools. I really say that, and I really do admire Florida State. I don't think this disproves anything. Part of me said that Florida State, I did mention on the podcast, I felt like Florida State was we were throwing too many of our eggs in the Florida State basket after that win against Alabama. And how good was this team? Because, like I said about this spot for FSU going to Virginia, likewise, Florida State or Alabama going to Florida State to open the season, that's a difficult spot too. No film on the other team, a lot of new athletes in Tallahassee, completely different football team than they were last year. Difficult spot for Alabama. So I felt like a lot of people, we were putting way too much stock in that Alabama win. And we we rushed Florida State up there into the top 10. And, every now and then, this is the way the cookie's going to crumble for some teams like this. You're going to run across an upset-minded football team that's playing decent football. And, they end up catching you on a good night and, beating you in 2 overtimes. But, the two turnovers early hurt. 2 interceptions by Castellanos. Whether or not, there was some questionable, officiating calls in this one as well. Mainly the touchdown that was called back there towards the end there where, I believe it was Pittman. I might be wrong there. I know some Florida State fans will correct me if I'm wrong on that one. In the end zone, Castellanos throws a very good ball to the back of the end zone, and receiver bobbles it a little bit, having some trouble corralling it. But it looks to me like he gains control and he still has a foot down and then he goes out of bounds. Well, it's called a touchdown on the field. It's called a catch on the field. Well, the rule is that we have to see irrefutable video evidence to turn that call over. So they review it for a few minutes. Ultimately, they come back and say that they're going to overturn the call, that it was incomplete. They're not going to give Florida State the touchdown. And here's the thing. And I'm one to be critical of the refs at times because I feel like they deserve it. They deserve a lot of the flack sometimes because they just make calls. Here's the thing about that call. If you are a Florida State fan out there and you're upset about that particular call, it's the fact that if they would have called it incomplete on the field, then it would have been upheld and they'd have kept it incomplete. Likewise, I feel like that's one of those calls where if they call a touchdown on the field, I don't think there's irrefutable video evidence to overturn it, so the touchdown needs to stand. I think that's one of those cases where the call on the field 100% dictates the final call after review. And in that particular instance, I feel like that one should have been, upheld. Touchdown Florida State, and we're looking at potentially, a different outcome. Florida State now, you're back to the drawing board. You're 3-1. Everything is still in front of Florida State. That's what, if you're a Florida State fan, you have to remind yourself of that. Hey, everything is still in front of us because Clemson sucks. Like you don't have to worry about Clemson in the ACC. The team that you have to worry about in the ACC, you are playing next weekend in Tallahassee. You're playing them, actually, technically this upcoming weekend, this upcoming Saturday, you're playing Miami in Tallahassee. So that to me that's the proving ground for Florida State because everything is still very much in front of you. I mean, that's a tough spot for any team to go on the road and play a Friday night game against a team like Virginia that's very capable of beating you. They were kind of it's like trap game scenario, and they fell victim to the trap. But I definitely have a lot of faith in Florida State. I don't think that I don't think this is going to affect them long term, I guess is what I'd like to say. I really like them to, to bounce back from this and get better. And like I said, everything is very much in front of them. Big time contest up against the Miami Hurricanes next Saturday in Doak Campbell Stadium. We will be talking about that one later in the week on the prediction show for sure. Still kind of on the fence about my prediction for that one. I'm going to have to take a few more days to think about that one in order to, really get a gauge, I guess, for what, for who I'm going to pick in that one. But you'll tune into the show and you'll find out. TCU and Arizona State, I know I mentioned this one briefly last week on the prediction show. I called 31-27 TCU. Final score ended up being 27-24 Arizona State over TCU. Just a hard-fought, gritty football game that, came down to the fact that Sam Leavitt just made more plays when it mattered. Hoover threw a couple picks for TCU. Can't really get, you can't give good teams, and you can't give good teams extra possessions. And also the fact that Arizona State was just able to run the football. Raleek Brown had 134 rushing yards on 21 attempts, and I think he averaged over 6 yards a carry. So really able to run the football there for Arizona State. Sam Leavitt, obviously we know what he's capable of. We've seen him play now. He's been on that national stage, was in the college football playoff last year. We saw him on that national stage as well. Arizona State bounces back in a big way, beats TCU to remain at 4-1. Still very much in control of their own destiny in the Big 12 Conference. Very much up there, hanging out near Iowa State. They're at the top of the conference standings. Everything's very much in front of Arizona State. Nothing really to worry about on that end. One of the biggest games to me, and it's a game that we a couple results that really shocked me. So first, I want to go over the first one. So we go over the fact that a lot of people were talking up this Notre Dame-Arkansas matchup. Like this could potentially be, could potentially be a trap spot for Notre Dame. This could be a spot where Arkansas out-physicals them, beats them in a game like 20-17 or something like that. Somewhat like how Arkansas did with Tennessee last year, where they beat them like that, and the whole world wasn't really expecting them to beat Tennessee last year. I saw some predictions on this game that it was kind of going to be a similar thing with Notre Dame, Arkansas, and guys, this game wasn't close. This game was the closest at the first opening kickoff. That's when this game was at its closest. But Notre Dame absolutely obliterated Arkansas. I mean, you're talking about a game that was 42-13 at halftime. Just an offensive clinic from Notre Dame. And not just so, and here's the thing, though. C.J. Carr. I've been telling y'all about this kid for weeks now. 22-30, 4 touchdowns, and 354 yards. The kid went off. That's the kind of play that Notre Dame's going to need from the quarterback going forward in this schedule. Everybody says, well, Notre Dame now 2-2. Can they make the playoff? And here's what I'll say. Notre Dame wins out, they make the playoff. And the Notre Dame haters are going to hate that one, but hey, if Notre Dame wins out, they're there. I feel like they're very much in. But this is the kind of matchup you look back on when you're making that assessment. Later in the season, we're talking about the college football playoff. This is the type of game where you look at and you're like, man, that right there kind of shows that, SEC defense, regardless of what you think about Arkansas, whether or not they're a good team, bad team, whatever, you watch that game and you think, man, Notre Dame just lined up and whipped them. They were 60% on third down, 643 yards of total offense. Just Arkansas could not stop a thing, nothing. I feel like Notre Dame could have telegraphed their plays and Arkansas wouldn't have had a chance. Ultimately, though, it led to the firing of Sam Pittman. I know I said on episode last week, it was time for Pittman to go in Fayetteville. They get rid of him. Now Arkansas begins their coaching search to try to figure out who's going to be the new head man there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. USC absolutely shows the world that, They were overrated, and it's like I said, hey guys, don't buy into the USC hype just yet. Let's wait and see what they do, because we've seen this song before, or I've heard this song before. Oh man, look at USC now. They're looking really good out there. Jalen Mailata is throwing the football really well. Lincoln Riley's offense, they look really dynamic. Illinois, 34-32. Over USC. Illinois, the same Illinois that got beat by 53 points and got absolutely boat raced by Indiana. Yes, that Illinois beats USC. So, who was right? Thank you. USC will probably shuffle out of the top 25 after this one, as they should be, because I still don't think they're that good. I'm not a believer. I have to see something different. And it's like the situation where your reputation precedes you, USC. You're not that good. And until we see something drastically different, I'm not going to think otherwise. Just not going to get to that point. 2 games of the weekend, big SEC contest. We had Ole Miss, LSU. We had Texas A&M and Auburn. Texas A&M Auburn actually ended up being one of those games, just very low scoring. A&M wins this one 16-10. Auburn has a really good defense, y'all. Like we think about, when we look at Auburn, you see on the offensive side, you see Eric Singleton Jr., you see Cam Coleman, you see Jeremiah Cobb, you see those playmakers that they have, guys that can win in space, guys that are very, very fast, so to speak, very skilled at those positions. What we don't talk about is the fact that Auburn has a really good defense, and the fact that their offense isn't playing complementary enough football is what kills me with Auburn. Is their defense, regardless, they look good at times. The problem is the offense isn't giving them enough help, and the defense spends way too much time on the field. And it's kind of what we saw against Texas A&M, because Texas A&M was able to pile up 414 total yards of offense, 200 yards on the ground, a little over 200 yards on the ground, a little over 200 yards through the air. But a lot of those yards came at the expense of Auburn's defense just being gassed, because they were on the field for, Texas A&M owned the time of possession battle, 35 minutes to 25 minutes. Auburn just could not keep drives going, could not establish drives and keep them going. They were 0 for 13 on third down, 0 for 13. That's inexcusable. You got to get better on third down. You give your defense a rest, but you only had 9 first downs the whole game, 0 for 13 on third down. Terrible performance from Auburn. The scoreboard is not really, indicative of how bad, you got beat, essentially. But your decent defense kind of hides and masks the fact that your offense is just absolute dog water. Horrible offense there in Auburn, Alabama. 16-10 the final there. LSU Ole Miss came down to who wanted it more, really. Who really wanted it more. I know this game, when I picked it last week, I did pick Ole Miss to win this football game. I figured Ole Miss would win somewhere in the neighborhood of 27-24. Final score ends up being 24-19. Lane Kiffin's guys look great. Ole Miss just, is a force to be reckoned with. There was a lot of questions around this team before the season started. They lost a lot of players, particularly on that defense. Pete Golding, had to kind of revamp the defense a little bit, kind of rebuild it from what we saw last year. And last year they weren't a chart-topping defense by any stretch of the imagination, but we saw they weren't a bend not break. They weren't a bend but don't break off or defense. They weren't a lights out shutdown defense. They were kind of somewhere floating around in the middle. They were kind of that middle of the pack, statistical defense that, can win you some ball games. But with that offense that they had last year, you really didn't need that kind of, you didn't really need that kind of defense, to win football games, because your offense was capable of scoring 40 and 50 a game. So you didn't really need that defense. This year, kind of a revamped look on the defensive side of the football for Ole Miss. I felt like they looked great. And one of the most disappointing things to me in all of football is LSU's offense. They're horrible. And we heard all offseason And before the season started, LSU was the team to beat in the Southeastern Conference. LSU was the team to beat in the national picture, college football playoff implications. I mean, I saw a lot of people that were LSU versus Ohio State for the Natty, before the season started. That was what people were calling. I think we can pump the brakes on that, and not so much pump the brakes. I think we can slam on them. Like, I've seen enough. The fact that you're only able to generate 19 points. Like, let's go through LSU here. You score 56 against Southeast Louisiana. Big, whoop-de-doo. Who cares? Now you've got your other contests that you've played. You scored 17. You scored 23 against Louisiana Tech. You scored 20 against Florida. And you scored 19 against Ole Miss. Your offense is what's holding you back, because the defense, there's no issue. You'll find no complaint from me on the side of LSU's defense. LSU's defense is good enough to keep them in any football game they play. The problem is the offense that we heard about, Garrett Nussmeier, Caden Durham, Aaron Anderson, with those guys. We heard about this offense all offseason, how dynamic they were going to be, how great they were going to be, and they have just fallen completely flat. I mean, they have been flat. Aside from Southeast Louisiana, which really doesn't tell you a whole lot because they're supposed to score 56 points against a team like that, it really doesn't tell you anything about this FSU or LSU football team. So LSU, until proven otherwise, I feel like we can kind of consider them a middle-of-the-road SEC team because they look horrible on offense. To me, they're not as good as Georgia. They're not as good as Alabama. They're not as good as Texas. At this very moment, I just don't see – they're not as good as LSU or Ole Miss, obviously. So, to me, they're just – until they prove anybody otherwise and that offense gets to firing up and firing on – I mean, not even all cylinders. I mean, heck, give me 6. If you've got an 8-cylinder engine, give me at least 6. I mean, good God, you're firing on like 3 or 4 right now. Like, it's terrible. It's sputtering. I can hear you down the road just misfiring all over the place. It's terrible. And you've got enough senior leadership and you have enough guys on that offense to make the thing go. So something is an issue outside of the athletes. The questions, the finger pointing, people can say, oh, well, Nussmeier. Oh, well. Need to be asking some more questions. Need to be asking different questions. And you can't ask them to the coach because the coach is going to pitch a little hissy fit every time you ask him a question that's apparently too hard for him to answer, or a question that he doesn't like, he's throwing a hissy fit. So, the questions need to be answered like, what is going on with LSU's offense? Because if LSU's offense doesn't get any better, they're not even making the playoff. They're going to finish this season 8-4. They're not going to make it to the playoff. You're going to have wasted Garrett Nussmeier's talent while he's been in Baton Rouge. You're going to waste it. He's going to go off to the NFL. And then, you're going to be back at square one, starting all over with a new quarterback next year. And that's not going to – I don't think if you can't coach Garrett Nussmeier up to be better, then I don't think you have any business coaching a freshman quarterback or even a sophomore first-year starter to try to be a good quarterback in this league. Not at all. So Ohio State ends up beating Washington. I had this game being a little bit tighter. I had it 30-21, but Ohio State, man, the defense, really showed up, held Washington to 6 points. Really kind of held, Jonah Coleman still 13 carries, 70 yards, just still a very gritty performance on his part. But, you really look at these, and same thing, third down. Good defenses get off the field on third down. 1 of 11. Washington was only 1 of 11 on converting third down. That was main difference in the football game there. Because likewise, these teams were very even in time of possession, as opposed, 31 minutes to 28 and some change. The split there, not really different. Ohio State had the only turnover in the football game. Washington had none. So statistically, they're pretty close. The biggest difference, third down. Ohio State completing 60% of their third downs versus Washington, which is less than 10%, 1 of 11. So there's your difference in the football game. If you can't extend drives, you're not going to be able to win many football games. Ohio State rolls 24-6 in that contest. Overtime game, and we had a few of them. We had a couple. I'll fire through these two real quick. Tennessee beats Mississippi State 41-34 in overtime. For a second there, y'all, man, I thought Mississippi State was going to do it. Mississippi State was hanging right with Tennessee and, just looked great. Thought that, Jeff Levy was going to get a premier win against one of the, better teams in the Southeastern Conference for sure. But even in a loss, I think I said it on last week's show, even in a loss, I feel like Mississippi State earned a lot of people's respect in this instance. I called 31-24 Tennessee, but I said last week, hey, if Mississippi State loses this one and they lose it on a last-minute touchdown, last-second field goal, overtime, whatever, that they would still have the respect of a lot of people. And I feel like even in this loss, I feel like you still earned it from a lot of people. And to me, I can make the argument tomorrow. I can make it right now. You can make the argument that I feel like Mississippi State, even in a loss, I feel like slide them to 25. I mean, they showed me enough for me to consider them a ranked team. They really did on Saturday. So, all right, the big two games that we had to close out the weekend. We will go through these because I know my Georgia fan friends, I know y'all want to hear me talk about it. Y'all want to hear me give my thoughts on that football game. First, we are going to start in Happy Valley. We're going to start with Oregon and Penn State, another game that went to overtime. We had quite a few this weekend. Great weekend for overtime football. Oregon ends up dropping Penn State 30-24 in overtime. And the narrative continues around James Franklin. And here's what I'll have to say about this football game, because for one, it's a crime that I feel like the two best games of the weekend were on at the same time. I'll just say that. So it's very hard to bounce the TV back and forth, So I had my laptop set up with the Oregon-Penn State game on, and then I had the TV going with Georgia-Bama on. So I was able to watch both games at the same time because that's the way you got to do these things sometimes. But Oregon and Penn State, the narrative continues around James Franklin, like I said, about, he can't win the big game. We've seen his record against top 5 opponents, top 10 opponents, ranked opponents. We've seen his record against Ohio State and Michigan. Like we keep looking for James Franklin to get over the hump. Like, when is he going to get over the hump? A lot of people figured that was this year with, when you've got the talented tandem of running backs that they have in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, you figured that, this is going to be the year for him to do it, especially with an experienced quarterback like Drew Aller, that's, seen a lot of football. Very cerebral kid, very good at changing the protections, getting the offense in the right sets, just a very good quarterback. He's a very coach-friendly quarterback. He's not going to put the ball out there in risky situations, just a very level-headed quarterback. But the problem is sometimes I feel like that's his worst trait. And let me explain what I mean by that, because I feel like that's his best trait. I feel like that's a good trait, but it also can be his Achilles heel. The fact that Drew Aller is not exactly I wouldn't say gunslinger. I'd say that he's just not a risk taker, I guess, for the lack of better terminology. I think he's just not a risk taker. Anytime you 137 yards on 14 of 25, 2 touchdowns, interception, 137 yards, like, I don't know. I just don't think Oregon's defense is that good. I really don't. I don't think their defense is that good for you to only have that many. Likewise, though, Oregon's defense looked really good. I mean, they looked good, not really good, but we can expect that from a Dan Lanning coach team, right? I mean, we know Dan Lanning. We know what he's capable of. We know what his teams are capable of, and we see a team that really held, for the most part, a Penn State rushing attack. Penn State's leading rusher, Katron Allen, 12 carries for 54 yards. Really not a really not a big day for them running the football. And that to me is one thing that I mentioned on the show last week when I was previewing this game. Is I'm like, man, this is one of those games where, you've got to run the football. If you're Penn State, you've got to run it. You've got to get yourself in those manageable yards to go situations. You've got to get in those 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 3s. Can't play behind the sticks. You can't get a lot of penalties to put you behind the sticks. Your quarterback needs to make good decisions, and you need to run the football effectively. And, they really didn't run the football effectively. Quarterback didn't put them in too great a position. But either way, you look towards the end of this game and you have a chance to win it, and you don't, and you lose it in overtime on an interception. And Oregon goes up 30-24, second overtime, misses the 2-point conversion, and then gives the ball to Penn State, turnaround, throws an interception, ball game over. The heartbreaking losses, that we've seen for Penn State over the last few years, just brutal, man. Penn State fans, I feel you. Like I'm right there with you. Y'all know where my loyalty lies, and they always seem to break my heart one way or another. But yeah, I mean, this game here to me proved that, one, I've been really high on Dante Moore. I know that I've brought him up multiple times this year so far. Talked about him, said, hey, this kid's going to be really good. I think the more snaps that he takes, the more games that he plays, he's just going to get better. And we saw a quarterback throw for about 250 yards. I think he had 1 touchdown. Grew up a little bit. Went into one of the most hostile environments in college football. Because Happy Valley and a Happy Valley wideout is not for the faint of heart. Like, we can talk about how Death Valley, and we can talk about Kyle Field and everything else. Like, you name it. Whatever school you want to throw out there, we can talk about it. But a whiteout in Happy Valley is one of the most electric atmospheres in college football. And for Dante Moore to go in there, I felt like he looked really composed. I felt like he made some really good throws. And also, DeCorian Moore catching the football, almost another 100-yard game for him, and on 7 catches. Just another phenomenal freshman that we've seen, this year so far. Last year we saw, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams. We see, we see a lot of these talented freshmen come in. I think it's time to have a conversation about DeCorian Moore there in Oregon, and how good he is. More and more. That's what I'm going to call it. More and more. You got Dante and DeCorian. And they can those two players right there can take you a long way. And I feel like Oregon, Ohio State are the class of the Big Ten once again this year. And I feel like that, when they meet, that is going to be a massive football game if it's for the Big Ten championship, because they're not gonna meet in the regular season, but they would meet in a potential Big Ten championship game, which could be insane, when we're thinking about it. But they get a week off, then they play Indiana in Eugene. That'll be another game for me that I'll definitely be watching. And I thought a few weeks ago when I saw this game on the calendar for, looking ahead to the future games, I was like, that's probably not going to be that good of a football game. But after what I've seen from Indiana, I feel like this is a game that we really need to kind of pump the brakes on and take a closer look at it, because I feel like this could be a really good football game. But that's a couple weeks out. So we will be we'll be previewing that one here in a couple weeks, and for the week 7, I believe that will be week 7 preview show. So go into that one. But all in all, very impressed with Oregon, very impressed with the effort, very impressed with the way that they looked offensively. Defense looked very good at times. So Oregon to be very much live in the playoff race, very much live in the national championship race. They look great. And James Franklin, we have to start really, if you're Penn State, you have to really start asking some hard questions about James Franklin and what his future what his future is with the program. And I hate to be that way because the guy wins, but you have to look at it as, man, he cannot. It's like in the games where you're playing nobodies, he can coach his head off. In the games where you're playing Ohio State and Oregon and Michigan, it's almost like he's not a big moment coach. He's not a coach for a big moment, and he just, pisses down his leg and just can't coach in the big moments. And that's just the way you got to be. And I'm sorry for the analogy if you don't like it, but that's exactly what it said. That's exactly what it is. He gets in those big moments and just cannot coach in the moment in a big game. And it's time that we kind of look at it and we have a conversation and we talk and we say, hey, is he the right guy? Is he the right guy for the job moving forward? Because Penn State, is he killer enough in that Big Ten conference now that you've added, a team like Oregon, you've added other teams to that conference? Can't stress it enough. You got to have that killer instinct now more than ever with more talent coming into the conference. Before your competition of Ohio State and Michigan, and that was it. Now you got some more competition that's come in that, you need to be ready for. So tough conversations. I know Penn State fans, I hear you. I see the frustration out there, message boards, Facebook, wherever. I see it. I get it. And it is warranted. So don't feel too bad about it. And don't let anybody try to talk you out of it, man. He's just, something's got to give. Either he's got to get over that hump, he's got to win a big game, and then he's got to, then he's going to keep doing it. But, it's now or never. I mean, the guy here on November 1st, they've got Ohio State. You've got Ohio State, Indiana in back-to-back weeks. At some point you got to do it if you want to make a play for the playoff, if you want to make a push for the Big Ten championship game. Gotta essentially, I think you got to win out. But we'll continue talking about that as the season rolls on. Big game of the weekend, one of the big games of the weekend. Other big game, Alabama, Georgia. Alabama takes down, Georgia in Athens 24-21, ending Georgia's 33-game home win streak. And as well as I do, Georgia fans, listen, I'm not trying to be too much of a Debbie Downer, too much of a pessimist here, whatever you want to call me. But let me just go ahead and tell you. Like, we've got to think about the fact that if there was going to be a team that was going to end this streak, it was going to be Alabama. It had to be Alabama. Because here over the recent years, if you're a Georgia fan, you have learned how to cope, I guess, with losing to Alabama. It's got to a point where losing to Alabama is just not something that I get upset over anymore. I expect it, actually. I expect it. Now, yes, I did pick Georgia to win. I felt like this felt like a good opportunity for, I felt like it was a good opportunity for Georgia to assert their dominance, assert themselves. Last year you lost a heartbreaker in Tuscaloosa, and this was the year to kind of say, hey, that win, we'll spot you that one, but this is our place, and we carry forward. We win in our place. But it, like I said, as a Georgia fan, I don't really get my hopes up when we're lining up across from that team. I just don't. And regardless of how you feel, I've seen all kind of different reactions to the game. Some of them idiotic, some of them not. We can talk about the fact that, oh man, I didn't like the play calling. There's always going to be people that are going to complain about Mike Bobo. It doesn't matter. He could pitch a perfect game, call a perfect game, put up 700 yards of total offense, and some of y'all would complain that he didn't put up 8. So the Bobo haters, come on, shut up. But the real issue, yes, to me, the number one glaring issue, the glaring issue staring us right in the face here is that Georgia got outcoached. When the game mattered, when points mattered, points are a premium in the fourth quarter. We pissed down our leg. For one, We get all the way to the 8-yard line. Georgia gets all the way down to the 8-yard line. We try to go tempo. And here's the issue I have with that play. We run a stretch play to Cash Jones, who's not our best power back, in a short yardage situation. We don't make a key block up front. Could that potentially be because of the miscommunication due to the fact that we were doing tempo? Because, listen, tempo is not Georgia's thing. I don't understand why we even tried it. That's not Georgia's offense. That might be Texas Tech's offense. That might be Josh Heupel's offense. That might be Oregon's offense back in the day. That might be a lot. That is not the Georgia offense. This is not a tempo offense. Couple things you kind of allow to happen when you rush that play. One, you rush that play, you don't communicate well up front, and you let Overton come through pretty much untouched, unblocked, and blows up the play. I don't think the play had a chance in heck anyway. You look at it, I don't think it had a chance in heck anyway of doing anything, but it didn't help that you didn't make a key block up front. But that could be a little bit of miscommunication because we're going tempo and we're doing something we don't normally do. That could be a problem. The second problem that you have is if you go back and look at the replay of that, if you slow the game down there, you slow the tempo down, you allow things to marinate, so to speak. You might find that they were going to review, or they might review the spot on that 3rd down and 4. Because if you go back and look at that replay, you could make the argument, and it looks very, very much like Gunnar Stockton was able to stretch it across the line and get it there for a 1st down. So when you look at that, I'm kind of, I'm thinking and I'm questioning. I'm like, man, what in the world? Why were we going fast when that's not normally our thing? And, why were we going fast? Because the problem can be one of two things. Like I said, you're either going to, one, miscommunicate like we did there. 2, you're not going to give the refs a chance to review the call. And it blew up in Georgia's face. Big momentum swing, 24-21 game there at the time. And you don't exactly, have a, what do you call it? Trying to think there. The points in that situation of the game are a premium. Like a premium. You've got to take the points. 24-21 game down there. Yeah, you can go for the win. People can say, he was going for the win. With the way that Georgia's defense was playing in the second half of that football game, why not take the points? Bama scored all of their points in the first half. So why not kick the field goal? And yeah, it's a chip shot field goal. And yes, it is a 4th and 1. But then, in that very moment, was not the time to be ballsy. Right? There's a time to make a ballsy call. There's a time to do it. And that was not the time. This loss falls 100% on the feet of Kirby Smart. 100%. Because, man, let me tell you, Chauncey Bowens ran his heart out. He deserved to win that football game. Now, Colby Young, regardless of the fact that he only caught a couple passes, because Georgia's offense didn't see the field that much, because we'd absolutely go full retard on 3rd down. Like the fact that, Georgia could not extend drives whatsoever. But Colby Young catches a few balls, but man, he blocked his heart out and he deserved to win that game. That defense, the way that they played in the second half, they deserved to win that football game, and Kirby robbed them of that football game. Robbed them. Like, who knows what happens? You tie the football game at 24, you kick the field goal, 24-24, you go to overtime, say Alabama wins it in overtime. So what? Give them a chance. Like, you absolutely have to give them a chance to win the football game. You don't take the points there. The play gets blown up. You do something you don't normally do that is 100% on coaching. Georgia got out-coached again by Alabama. And the thing that's crazy is Kirby can coach good against anyone else. And it's like when the Crimson Tide is across the field on the opposing sideline, we forget how to coach. Our situational awareness as a coach goes completely out the window. Like, fourth quarter, your defense is playing lights out. Chip shot field goal to tie it up. Make Alabama beat you. You know, a 24-24 game, if they drive the length of the field and beat you, so be it. But they didn't have to do anything. You know? So, it can be embarrassing. It's very embarrassing the way that game was called from a coaching standpoint. Very disappointed in the coaching staff, I guess, because they looked a little scared sometimes. Coaching staff had a little bit of some scared tendencies. But the issue lies in the fact that, one, you couldn't extend drives. That's a big one. And in a situation like this, Bama has 36 minutes of time of possession to Georgia's 24, and everybody's talking about, well, Gunnar Stockton didn't have a really good game. He didn't get to touch the field. Like, he didn't get to touch the field at all. 24 minutes of time of possession. I mean, just that's not, lots of penalties killed you. 68 yards worth of penalties. The fumble did not help Nate Frazier, who I have been critical of. But Nate Frazier has got to protect the football. That is your number one job as a running back, is to protect the football. Number one job. Like, I don't care how fast you are. I don't care how quick you are laterally. I don't care how you block in the backfield. I don't care. Hold on to the football when your number is called. Like, it's funny. He didn't see the grass of the football field the rest of the game. Like, because people are sick of it. Talented kid, can't stop coughing the ball up. And that's the difference in the football game. You cough the ball up down there near our own 20-yard line. Defense stands tall, holds Alabama to a field goal. Guess what the difference in the football game was? That's why those kind of plays matter. And, I don't want to feel like I'm coming in both barrels on the coaches. But a lot of it falls at their feet, for sure. You can't turn that ball over there. Can't do it. So, between the fumble, dropping a wide open, have a pass wide open, Taylor drops it. That's a touchdown. That's 28-24 in the fourth quarter if he catches that football. I mean, got to catch him. But you drop that pass, Nate Frazier coughs the ball up, and then the coaching decisions, Georgia's not looking at it, didn't deserve to win this football game. And hats off to Alabama, because bouncing back, you knew you were going to get an Alabama football team that was, their backs were against the wall, so to speak. Like, they knew they had to win to keep their hopes alive of what they want to do, because they've got some tough games coming up. 2 losses after Saturday would have been a very, very, very tough spot for this football team. So, that's, they kind of come in, they have their backs against the wall, the sense of urgency is higher, and we've seen historically that there's no team that plays more physical and more tough and more like their hair's on fire than an Alabama that knows that they have to perform and their back's against the wall. And that's what we saw. And, I think that's what the whole nation saw. But Ty Simpson, just as good as advertised. I've been watching this kid all year. At times he's made some mistakes, but man, his anticipation, some of the throws that he was making were just unreal. Like, absolutely unreal the way that they looked. Just a lot of times he's throwing the ball in a lot of zone. Just unreal, the arm that this kid has. And Here's the thing with Ty Simpson and here's what I like. Here's what I like about him. Not just the fact that he's a great quarterback, he throws the ball really well, whatever else. Because a lot of that, to play quarterback in the SEC, you kind of have to throw the football well. You have to have a live arm, everything. The ability for him to manage the crowd noise, and able to adjust his protections and adjust at the line and able to get his guys in the right position to make plays, that to me is something that sets a quarterback like him apart from somebody that's just physically gifted but isn't mentally gifted. And you find quarterbacks and you see quarterbacks like that all the time that are just physically gifted, sure, but not mentally gifted. And Ty Simpson's both of those. Physically gifted, mentally gifted, just a great quarterback all around. We're starting to see this team take shape. We're starting to see Alabama look really good. This is what, going forward, I feel like this is going to be a team that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. They play Vanderbilt next weekend. That's another spot for them to just prove that their dominance, that Bama dominance is back. Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, people say all they want about Ryan Williams, but Jeremy Bernard's the best receiver on that football team. And I would make the argument, like, people just buy into the hype of Ryan Williams. They buy into the hype of what he's able to do. Ryan Williams is the third best receiver on this offense, and that says a lot. Because Isaiah Horton, to me, is better than Ryan Williams. Jeremy Bernard, to me, is like Kirby said, the catalyst to that offense, and I would not disagree. I feel like he's kind of that focal point guy, but I feel like you've got Isaiah Horton there at the 2, and Williams, to me, is your third best option at wide receiver. And when Ryan Williams is your third best option, that's pretty dangerous. Very dangerous offense going forward. Still concerning to me, if there's any concerns with Bama, still concerning to me that they're not able to run the football that well. They still eclipsed 100 yards, but they had to work really hard for it Saturday. And a lot of times they were stood up for 2 or 3 yards, 2 yards, 1. So that's the big thing with me, Alabama going forward, is I feel like they need to establish more of a run game and be more complimentary on that front. Because I don't think you're going to have success throwing the football 50 times a game, 40 times a game, and being one-dimensional. I think you need to be 2D. You need to have the run game working. You need to have the pass game working as well. All in all, hats off to Alabama. They just have, the question remains, do they have Georgia's number? Yes, I feel like they do. I feel like that we can beat every single team. Georgia can beat every single team in college football except Alabama. I don't know what it is. We could play the worst Alabama team of the last century and still find a way to lose to them. Could that be the fact that Alabama gets up for Georgia because it's Georgia, or could it just be the fact that Georgia just can't play against Alabama? Remains to be seen. We'll see some more. I'm sure we'll see some more contests. We might even see this matchup again later in the season. Who knows? We'll see. Big weekend though, man. A lot of crazy things. I think 4 of the top 8, if I'm not mistaken, teams lost this weekend. So a little bit of a reshuffling of the rankings. And we will go over that. We'll go over that right now because the new AP's out. And we'll start at 25. Arizona State. Virginia moves up to 24. BYU moves up a couple spots to 23. Illinois up a spot to 22nd. Notre Dame at 21. Michigan at 20. Mizzou at 19. Florida State falls back 10 spots to 18th. Georgia Tech at 17. Vandy at 16. Tennessee at 15. Iowa State 14. LSU drops 9 spots. Fair. To 13, Georgia drops 7 spots to 12th. Texas Tech up 1 spot to 11th. Bama up 7 spots to 10. Texas at 9. Indiana at 8. Penn State drops to 7th. Texas A&M moves all the way up to 6, which is questionable. 5, Oklahoma. Ole Miss at 4, also kind of questionable there. Miami at 3. Oregon jumps to 2. Ohio State still on top of the college football world, ranked the number 1 team in the country. Thank y'all once again for tuning in to another episode of After the Whistle. We will be talking about Next week's action, or the upcoming Saturday's action, we will go over that. We got Florida State, Miami. We got a couple of other key matchups and key conferences that could really take shape or shape the college football playoff race and the conference race in their respective conferences. Until next time, y'all enjoy your week, and I will catch y'all on Thursday for the prediction show. See y'all.